excited today to have Narina on. Narina is one of our preferred attorneys. She's probably our favorite attorney we work with on our team. Super knowledgeable, professional. We have some legal questions for her today that we'll go over. She has offices in East Brunswick and Fort Lee. She services New Jersey and all the real estate legal matters, and so excited to have her. So welcome.
Thank you.
Narina.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So we'll jump right into it. If you want to give any kind of background on yourself, how you kind of decided you wanted to, become an attorney and specifically get into real estate law. You're obviously excellent at it, but I don't know what that path looked like for you.
So I always knew I was going to go to law school and become a lawyer. I wanted to open up my own firm, but I did go and get experience. I worked as in-house counsel at an aerospace and defense manufacturing company where I was negotiating 100-page contracts, 100-page contracts, working with federal agencies. And that's where I really got my negotiation skills and contract review skills. And my family's in real estate. I've purchased a few properties of my own also. So I figured it was an easy way to start in something that I already had knowledge and experience in. And then the business actually did very well.
It's totally awesome. Yeah, we were introduced by a mutual friend. And, in reality, I had no idea how young you were, but working on that first file, I figured you'd been in the business a pretty long time because you were so professional and it seemed experienced and knowledgeable about the whole file. It was a difficult first file. With regards to the consumer, the buyers or sellers selecting an attorney, I mean, oftentimes this is the biggest asset that they're either selling or purchasing. So it's a big decision in who they choose to represent their interest, their best interest in real estate. Would you have any advice for someone that was choosing an attorney and kind of what to look for and maybe what to stay away from or gravitate towards?
I'd say to take the advice from your realtor. They obviously do this for a living. They know how the attorneys operate. They trust certain attorneys. They know that they can ask them to shoot an email out over the weekend or expedite, some work. So go with the attorney that your realtor is suggesting. If you take on an attorney that's also handling criminal law or maybe personal injury, the real estate transaction is likely not of priority and it's not going to move along as quickly as you want it to.
Yeah, I think that's what we get. We see happen a lot is they're a family member, a friend, somebody suggests them, and I always ask, what is their what do they practice specifically, right? Because then you get into their other fields, and then they're pulled away from the actual file.
Yeah, not only do you specialize in real estate, but you're in the office to handle the real estate file. What happens sometimes in my experience is the client will recommend this attorney, like you said, and they're in court. So you send the file over on a Wednesday, which might be time sensitive, especially depending on the market and the conditions. And they don't even give you a call back till Monday and say, hey, I can't touch the file till Tuesday. In the meantime, the deal's been killed because there's been an offer that came in. The other side doesn't think you're serious because the attorney didn't attend to it.
And there are some attorneys that actually respond when they're on vacation.
I was talking about Fredo all week.
And that's super important because you know what? Listen, we want to get away, and it's not fun or ideal, but on the other end, there's a buyer and seller who need to get things done too. So that's super important.
And we had you in obviously because we have a good relationship with you. But we're super selective with who we choose because we've worked as realtors so hard to that point to get the file to the attorney. There has to be a level of trust that they can navigate through these waters. One of the things you do many, many things very, very well. We'll get into a few of them. But one of the things that I noticed right off the bat was you have staff, you have multiple offices, you're extremely successful, but you take the time on each file very often to speak to the client directly, which a lot of attorneys don't do. They'll have either a paralegal or a receptionist or someone else, which is fine, handle it. It's not fine for me because oftentimes things get lost in translation. Mm-hmm. And one of the things you do is you actually take the time to pick up the phone or email directly or call me first or my staff first and kind of run things by us on and get together on what the best way to handle this in the best interest of the client would be. Why do you feel that it's so important for you to spend, because time is valuable, especially as the head attorney of your firm. Why do you feel like it's that important that you speak directly with the client on a regular basis throughout the transaction?
So a lot of times the clients may be stressed. It may be their first time purchasing a home. It's a huge investment, probably one of the biggest investments they'll make in their life. And it's important to make them feel that, they're in good hands, walk them through it. It doesn't take much to just give them a call. Like you said, obviously I'm doing a million things a day, but I do need to incorporate this, and I do incorporate this into my day to just follow up, make sure everything is going well, and speaking directly to the clients and collaborating with the agents, before communicating to the other side is important so that there's no miscommunication. Everybody's on the same page. You don't have somebody.
It makes such a difference.
Yeah. You don't have somebody calling you like, why'd you send that email
Right.
before
Right.
touching up with me?
Right.
So
Right.
it's important to make sure everybody's on the same page just so the transaction can move along smoothly.
Right. And I mean, Alfredo is one of the top producers in the state, but he is one of the first things he said as well, is like your communication skills, ability to get everyone on the same page. And listen, even an easy real estate transaction, there's issues. It's never perfectly smooth. And the ability to not get off track and keep composed and keep the client focused for their better good, so that you keep them on track to closing. Because ultimately, the seller typically wants to sell the home and the buyer wants to buy the home.
Right.
And they get emotional or whatever, but you're able to keep that moving forward. I think it's remarkable. Alfredo, you had some experience with that as well.
Absolutely. I mean, we end up, representing a seller in this case, and I asked the agent who bought the offer, do you have a relationship with the attorney? He said no. So I knew we were going to have some bumps in the road, and that's exactly what happened. It seemed like that attorney, and it doesn't always happen. I mean, obviously, it still could be a good attorney, but there are definitely instances where you'll run into an attorney who either has a big ego, just gets easily offended, or just takes the file on their own. It seems like what was discussed prior to them getting the file is different than what ends up happening when they're in attorney review. And you don't need some hero
But it doesn't
attorney.
feel like a team either.
Yeah, it's not even a team. It's the agent who's on the other side doesn't know what's going on. The buyer now seems like the agent is working against them, which is not the case. And now it's the buyer and attorney. And it's like you said, it's not a team anymore. So I guess
we realize we're not attorneys,
Mm-hmm.
but I've done approximately well over 2,000 closings. I've been through it enough times to understand the nuances of real estate law. So I need an attorney like yourself to cross the T, dot the I, make sure. But for an attorney to totally write you off like you don't know anything and
Right.
not listen to your opinion, or maybe we could try this approach. There's going to be times, I'm sure, that I go to you and say, what about this? And you're going to say, no, that's not the way we're going to do it. And I respect that. But there's other times we'll put our heads together and we come up with a great solution. So I think that's important. One of the other things that I felt, again, you do a lot of things excellent, but your ability to navigate through more difficult situations. We had one recently and I think you're on vacation for that, going back and forth. And it is overwhelming at times where you're putting so much time in, and we appreciate it. But your ability to deal with, in that particular case, in my opinion, an attorney who didn't really do what they probably should have done, and you're kind of trying to do their job and guide them through that portion of it, and also represent your client and your client's best interest, of course, and communicate that they didn't do that. I'm trying to get them to do that. And then there's, I think you just mentioned, dozens of emails behind the scenes where you're just, how do you, have you always been that way where you have an ability to kind of problem solve and get through issues, even if it feels like the other side is trying to create more issues?
I have had a good experience in mediation, negotiations, reaching agreement. I clerked for a judge in Middlesex County, and I won like top mediator of the courthouse.
This doesn't surprise me.
And I got a handwritten letter from the presiding judge. So I think that comes with just having compassion and understanding. And I don't really look at these as like clients in business. It's like sort of like almost feels like family. And it's just like what needs to be done aside from business. So I think just having the understanding, and not just sending an email and telling your client, all right, well, I sent them an email, I'm going to wait for the response, but giving them a call, talking to them, just saying like, listen, we're trying to reach an agreement on this. What do you offer? Let me see what I can do. And just trying to work together as opposed to being opponents.
And the agents appreciate it. I mean, I follow you on social media. every day I think I see another successful closing, and the client commenting, "Thank you so much. Couldn't have done this without you." And I see it firsthand from my clients thanking. And I mean, your customer rating has to be off the chart as far as 5-star, but they go a step further and comment on your site and comment and call me personally and say, thank you for recommending Narina. She was excellent. She went above and beyond. And oftentimes those clients have gone through a transaction, so they have something to compare it to. Sometimes when you're dealing with the first-time buyer, they don't realize how above and beyond
good the experience was.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you brought up your negotiation skills, because I think that's what it takes in your mediation too. You were saying, right? Because I think sometimes, as the case recently is that the other attorney you're dealing with, it's an unknown. Well, we'll get to that later, because there are sometimes you work with attorneys that you do know, and it does help the transaction. But there's oftentimes you're working with an attorney you don't know, and you don't know who you're running into. Is it a person with a big ego who doesn't really care about mediation or how to negotiate? And from your experience, obviously, how difficult sometimes is that to navigate versus, it doesn't seem like they're looking out for the client's best interest, because sometimes they kill deals, and that's not really what the buyer wanted. They didn't want, or the seller, in whichever case, they didn't really want that deal to die, but the attorney just got in the way, it seems like. So how do you, I think we kind of were navigating that in this past transaction. What do you think is I guess it's your ability to negotiate and mediate, but how difficult is that sometimes?
I think what he's asking too is what separates you. There's a lot of attorneys we work with, but the end result of a similar file is oftentimes different. And to your point, the buyer wouldn't have gone in through this process,
right?
Got a home inspector, paid a home inspector, got the appraisal, oftentimes paid the appraisal, filled the application, did the contract. They wouldn't go through all these steps if they didn't have an intention at some point to purchase the home. But then the whole thing implodes. And oftentimes, in my experience, it could have been resolved. There's some files that, listen, no matter what, they shouldn't buy it or they shouldn't sell it. There's variables. But oftentimes I notice on a similar file with someone that approaches the business like yourself, we close that deal. And the buyer's extremely happy and the seller's extremely happy. And in other files, everyone is upset, everyone's emotional, and the whole thing went kaput. Is there something that you could pinpoint that you feel like separates an attorney with your approach of that successful closing versus an attorney that maybe has much less closings as far as the ratio goes?
So I think it's important not to take it so seriously and remove your ego. You're doing this for your clients. You're doing this as a team. And it's like the buyers and the sellers are not opposing teams. We're all a team. So when you're working together to get something done, everybody needs to cooperate. So when I do have a difficult attorney that I'm dealing with, I'll usually reach out to the agent and I'll reach out to my client and I'll say, how firm do you want me to be? Do you want me to go into battle, or
That's awesome.
do you want me to, try to cooperate with them, work with them and stuff? And often, they'll tell me, you know what, it's okay. Like, be a little lenient and let's get it going. It's okay if they're asking for something that wasn't agreed to previously. But I'll always check with my clients and say, this is what's happening. I can either go this way or that way. So which way do you want me, to work? And that's how
awesome.
I navigate through it.
Yeah, I was just actually at the gym this morning with a friend of mine, and I recommended him to a doctor who lives in Frank Lake, so I knew it was a friend of mine. And even when I wasn't really friends with the doctor, who I'm actually a very good friend with now, he always spoke to me like we were equals. And some doctors I went to, it's like, I don't want to say they were talking down to me, but they treated me differently, like not like an equal. Mm-hmm. And attorneys are no different in my experience, where you deal with an attorney and sometimes I don't blame them because I deal with a lot of realtors, but you're a realtor, right? So, we're not going to respond to you. We're not going to really keep you in the loop. We don't really care. From day one, with not only myself as a team leader, but all of my agents and all of my staff, you've treated everyone as an equal, which I think is awesome. It speaks to your character, not only getting the deals done, but just your ability to team up and work towards a common goal. So we definitely appreciate that.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you, because we get calls from clients sometimes, and we explain it from a real estate agent's standpoint, but there's intricate pieces you put together for the closing. So if you had to explain to a consumer kind of A to Z, once you receive the contract, I guess as attorney review begins to the closing day where they pick up their keys and title closes. Could you give like a little bit of just a brief overview of that process as you get the file and you begin to work on it through the closing?
Sure. So I get the file. I give a call to the agent. I say, is there anything I need to know specifically about this? I'll make sure that there's no additional provisions, or if there are, I'll just confirm them with them. Just get a little quick conversation
Well,
going.
that right there is good, because we have instances where attorneys are just sending out a rider and maybe the agent forgot to say, oh, but make sure you do this, right? So that's actually very key.
Yeah, provisions, just so everyone understands, it's just changes or an addendum or edits to the original contract. So
not all attorneys do that, so that's great.
And then I'll just give my client a call and review the contract for accuracy, make sure all the numbers are correct, make sure they're sort of aware of the dates, the deadlines. And then I will send out the attorney review rider, which is additional provisions or changes to protect my client, whether it's the buyer or the seller. And then once I receive a response from the other side, I'll give my client another call. I'll let them know what's going on. If everything is fine, we're ready to sign. I either have them sign or I'll sign on their behalf. And then once it's under contract, that's when the agent starts to, help them set up the inspection appointments, whatever it is. They work closely with their lender. They provide all the documentation that they need for the loan approval. Then at some point shortly after that, I'll order title just to make sure that there's a title search done, there's no judgments or any liens on the property. Once title comes back, we sort of prepare for closing. The lender and the title company finalize the numbers. If an appraisal is needed, the lender does that as well. And then we head to closing after that. That's just a basic overview.
Yeah,
obviously
absolutely.
there's like inspection negotiations.
Yeah, I was going to say that's one thing you're excellent at. We didn't even touch on that. So when the inspections are done, typically, in our experience, the buyer's attorney will send over either a letter saying they want credits, repairs, or a little bit of both. And that's another thing that you've been excellent at representing your client in a fair manner and getting, again, not killing the deal, but getting them as much as possible with keeping the deal together.
Yeah.
With regard, the other question we've got a lot recently was with regards to UNOs or use and occupancies for sellers who may need to stay in the home after the closing, which you've been able to facilitate. Would you be able to give another brief overview on that for someone that may not be familiar with the UNO, use and occupancy?
So sometimes sellers will need a few more days to stay. Either the new house that they're moving into is not ready or whatever it may be. So they'll tell me this usually ahead of time. Sometimes we'll include it as a clause in the rider and say that the buyers and the sellers will agree to a UNO, and the UNO will be negotiated later on in the process. And then sometimes the sellers can stay for free, but usually it's a daily rate that the buyers will request just to pay for their mortgage. I've had UNOs for a week. I've had UNOs for 2 months.
The maximum is 2 months, right?
It depends what the parties agree to, so.
And it typically be the potential buyer, the person that's purchasing the home would cover the new costs, correct? Like they anticipate, I guess once they close, cover the costs of taxes, property taxes, mortgage,
right?
Utilities.
That's also like what's agreed to. Either they'll say have the seller, the old owner, cover all the costs, or they'll say, it's just a daily rate of $150. Whatever is agreed to between the parties is usually what is set forth in the UNO.
Would you recommend that for both parties, or do you think that agreement typically would favor one party or the other?
As an attorney always says, it depends.
Right.
Usually it's more favorable to the seller, obviously,
Okay.
if the buyer is really trying to move in. If the buyer doesn't care to move in, they're just, getting a daily rate for it, and they don't mind.
And I think that's probably why we saw that usage of it ramped up over the past 2 years, because that market it was such a seller's market. So I did run into it more. You probably would agree, right?
Right.
Yeah. So I probably would agree with that answer, because it was just so put into place in use during the last 2 years when it was a heavy seller's market. But it also differs from, if you could explain how it differs from a lease, because I'm not an attorney, but my understanding, or what I would assume, is that you wouldn't want to place that buyer now as a tenant to give them any
The
tenant rights.
right?
Right. We'll actually have a provision that says that this is not a tenancy, this is not a lease. The seller is responsible for any damages to the property. There's also an escrow that's held, usually by the title company or the attorneys, in the amount of $5,000, $10,000, just depending on how long the stay is, in the event that there's any damages to the property. So there's definitely provisions in there that make sure that everybody knows it's not a lease.
Would it differ if the buyer overstays their welcome, is legally to get to remove, versus obviously a tenant that it's a little bit different situation.
So if the seller does not vacate by the date,
I'm sorry, the seller.
if the seller doesn't vacate by the date that they're supposed to, there usually is a higher charge. So if it's $150 daily for a week, past that week, it'll be $300 or whatever is agreed to. But
I imagine that's not a common occurrence.
No.
I mean, it's someone that lived in the home for years, and so to damage their own home that they've sold, oftentimes there's a level of pride and.
right, of course.
It's not like
I've
a
never seen
random
it happen.
person just sticking in the house.
The money's always, the escrow is always released back, and there's no issue. But if they do stay a day or two extra, I have seen them actually pay the higher rate.
Sure. Sometimes movers can't show up on time or something. Right. I'm going to give my opinion on this, and then I was curious to know your opinion. As an agent that's been doing this 20 years, I see such a disparity and difference between someone that really treats this as a business, a top producing agent, and someone that might be part-time or lacks experience. And not to say that latter, the second person, couldn't get to that new position. But I even know as myself, when I came in day one and had never sold a home, I'm a much different person, approaching a real estate matter now. And even now than I was 10 years ago. But I also noticed that disparity or difference among attorneys tremendously. Not only the ability to work with me and be creative, but also the lack of knowledge. And we were speaking about this in the beginning of the podcast, but if they're diluted a bit or pulled in different directions where they're doing divorce, marital, right, or something totally unrelated to real estate, not only are they pulled away and perhaps in the court system, but they're not focused on this like you are day in and day out. So I was curious to know if, as these files come in, do you notice a level, maybe a different approach or a level of professionalism with the realtors, and also when you're working with an attorney on the other side?
Absolutely.
Okay. I was curious because I didn't know if you'd say, no, I kind of just do my thing. I notice it right off the bat. Personally.
I know, just because I've been doing this and I do it on the daily, I do notice that top producing agents are way more organized, way more professional. They have the staff that follows up. They have the staff that maybe circulates a document that needs to be DocuSigned, helps the attorney out. Even the emails are written differently. I mean, everything is just so much more organized. Everybody's in the loop. They're not really asking for something twice.
Right.
You could tell from that first email then.
Yeah. I can tell by the way it's formatted with the way the contact information is listed, how professional this is going to be.
We're the same way. And when I first contacted you, you were immediately responsive. I actually called you on your cell phone because you said it was okay. And some attorneys don't do that. The attorneys I deal with, I've always been able to call them on a cell phone, maybe because of the volume, maybe because that's how they are and they just are responsive. But you were permitted me to do that. You picked up my phone call right away. You were responsive. I sent you the file. Writer literally went right out. And right within the first minute of speaking to you and then confirming that within probably an hour or two of you handling the file, I'm like, this is going to be a great contact for the team. And I immediately called Alfredo. I said, add her to the drive.
Yes, added right in there.
So our drive would be that
our vendor list.
Yeah, your permit. The agents could choose to use your services, which clearly they're doing now. So.
Are you, and maybe you're not, and you're just open to, are you trying to maybe exclusively work with an agent that, like ourselves or other top producers who that, things would go a little bit more smoother, or do you get most of your business that way, or you're finding that clients are also finding you?
So I would love to only work with the top producers just because of the organization and professionalism on both sides. I do I'm open to obviously working with agents and, giving everybody a chance and doing my best work.
And I feel like your
for-
obligation is also to the client.
Of course.
You know,
Yeah,
so
I
the
guess,
client
I guess
contacts you directly.
my question actually really was: are you getting contacted more from clients, or a lot of your business is
Where's
filtered
your
through?
referral source?
Yeah.
It's both. I do have agents who, I work with and have a relationship with that send me the clients and ask me to reach out to them. And then I do have just word of mouth. Somebody said, somebody closed on a house.
Okay.
They recommended me, and then I'm talking to the clients and retaining them that way. So,
I
it's
mean,
a
you were
mix.
busy. You were busy when we met. I think it was 2 years ago, whatever it was. And I only imagine you've gotten incrementally busier. And honestly, I was telling my team this, but the last time that the last recession, 2008 or whatever it was, 9, I really took a huge chunk of the market and really grew my business. And I see the same for you, because then you appreciate the true professionals even more. As agents really can't afford to lose. We're no longer order takers. And I talked about it at the team meeting yesterday,
Yep.
where just put this offer in, or I want, list my house and it's going to sell in 2 days. That's changing quickly, and it's going to continue to get more difficult. So as the agents hold onto these deals more and more carefully, and they really need these deals to close, because they're not going to write 10 offers a week, and it might be 1 or 2. They're going to appreciate all the things we've talked about that you do. You speak with the clients directly. You have the ability to work through these issues and navigate through problems, representing the client's best interest, so the client is really happy. Because the other thing is, we've worked with attorneys that are pretty easygoing or whatever, but they're not responsive, or they, for whatever reason, the client doesn't believe that the attorney is representing their best interest. That has absolutely not been the case with you. The clients I've worked with have been ecstatic with your response time, your ability to solve problems, and literally profusely thanking me for recommending you. So I can't imagine they're not going to send their family and their friends. So as we refer clients to you, we appreciate you taking them. I can't imagine that's not going to spiderweb for you, especially in a more difficult market.
And also, so through the clients, and word of mouth, and then also with the agents on the other side, like I'll be on the attorney on the other side, and then they'll send me a case or a client afterwards.
Right.
So
right. They're like, oh, I wish she was working with me on this one.
Right.
I'd rather be with her. The last thing I want to touch on, and then if there's anything you want, was it's just to lighten it up a little bit. But is there any funny stories you have with the closing of a client, or memorable clients that maybe you became friendly with, after a file? I imagine you're friends with a lot of these people.
Anything you can disclose.
I imagine you're friends with a bunch of. Seeing their responses, I can't imagine that you don't keep in touch with clients. But was there anything that sticks out in your mind as either funny or memorable with the file?
So memorable. I had a client close at my East Brunswick office a few months ago, and she was in tears throughout the whole process. And she actually broke down and cried. And she was like, this has been my dream since I was 4 years old.
That's nice.
I've been drawing houses.
Oh my God.
Like drawing houses on
Great.
papers, always wanting to own a house and have a backyard. And she's like, I've lived in apartments and condos and stuff. And so she finally closed on a house, and we hugged, we cried. She made me cry.
Oh my God.
That's nice.
That's never happened to me.
It was
awesome.
so nice to feel, the happiness and feel rewarded for being able to help somebody.
That's so cool.
That's very cool.
Anything else from your side? Anything you wanted to touch on, or that's
No,
what I had
mean,
for today?
yeah, I mean, just to your point earlier, like it's just so important how the negotiation between the varying attorneys. I think that just sticks out to me. The days of order taking are over, like you said earlier, and now the real work is kind of back in full swing.
Even more important than ever to
And
choose wisely.
I've noticed just since the beginning of the year, like how much harder we have to fight for our clients. Whereas before, if some roadblock comes up, either party's going to let it go because it's just the low inventory, or they just went through. If it's a buyer, they went through 5 houses to finally get one.
Right.
So we'll be okay. But now it's not happening anymore. So now the real work begins, and who's on your team is super important.
Yeah,
so I think we
valuable.
touched upon that, and I think that's really going to be what separates you and hopefully us as well.
Narina, do you have a website or social media you want?
KMNJlaw.com.
Awesome.
I also wanted to say, to touch on that, you guys have obviously been amazing. And
thank you.
not just for me to work with, but I see how you operate with your clients. And we are talking on Saturdays and Sundays, and we're texting throughout the day and discussing it and getting on calls, and you'll ask me to send something out on a Saturday or a Sunday, and I'm glad to do it. Like, there's a mutual understanding. And just to see how much your entire team and all the agents that I've worked with on your team, how much they all care for their clients has been tremendous.
Thank you.
Because I work with a bunch of agents from all different counties in New Jersey, and some are like, oh, whatever, they forget to schedule the CO, they forget to do this, they forget to do that. The clients at the closing, they haven't set up the key exchange and stuff. So
well, I've had many agents kind of like, they say it, they just come out and say, I just passed, like the file's passed off. Oh, the attorney has it. And they want to wash their hands after. It's like, that's not, I mean, maybe that worked for the past 2 years, but that's not always going to be the way. So thank you. No, it shouldn't be the way anyway. I mean, I that's not how we operate, but it worked, or it was, it sometimes didn't do them any detriment because the files were easier to move forward, but it's going to catch up to you, and that's not the way we operate. So I appreciate that.
We appreciate the kind words.
Not at all. You guys are in direct communications all the time, and you make sure that everybody's on the same page. You'll give a call and clarify anything that has been discussed between me and the client, and follow up with them. And that really has been amazing by everybody on your team, and especially you both.
Thank you so much, and we appreciate you. There's a lot of people a lot of attorneys that try and get our business, and we've had dealings with either directly or indirectly, and it's not going to be a fit for us. So we're super selective, and you've blown our expectations away. So we appreciate it.
For sure.
So thank you everyone for watching. Anything else that you? Yeah. Narina's website.
KMNJ.
We'll get that fixed.
Our Instagram, Braconi or Team Braconi, and we have our website up. We'll put that up. And Narina's is kmnjlaw.com. So please contact her. She's excellent. And thank you all for watching. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.